Welcome to round 6 of NASAT 2018. The team on my left is Maryland Black, and the team on my right is Nevada. A, I think, yeah. A through Z. All right. So let's start. Toss-up 1. A philosopher with these two names described how God is everything that truly is because he himself makes all things and is made in all things, in a text suppressed for its pantheistic implications. That philosopher with these two names was legendarily stabbed to death with pens by his students and wrote The Division of Nature. A different philosopher with these two names developed the idea of a specifying or instantiating property, sometimes rendered thisness, called hexeity, and contended that words mean the same thing whether applied to God or to things, his concept of univocity of being. For 10 points, give these two names shared by a 9th century Irish philosopher called Eriugena and a 13th century Scottish philosopher.
Duns Scotus. John Scott.
1 second. No, sorry. Whose middle appellation was Duns.
John?
No, I have John Scotus underlined without any instructions to prompt on Duns Scotus.
Right,
Sorry.
That's a mistake. We should protest that.
Yeah, can I protest?
Okay. I just want to go by what the answer line says, and
No, I mean, that makes sense.
Did you not correct yourself? I said Duns Scotus.
I mean, he said, it's not correcting. I mean, he said Duns Scotus, but.
Yeah, sure.
yeah, because it was asking about the two names that were shared, and you said Duns
I know, I
Scotus,
feel
but
like
the
I
answer was John
I
Scotus.
feel like we should.
I thought when they said two names, it meant like literally two.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, I think we should be
read the
absolute,
protest.
but
All right.
whatever.
So we have a protest marked down. We said Duns Scotus, and you buzzed on Scottish,
I mean,
basically.
fair enough for actually knowing
Okay.
what it was.
And
Yeah, nice. That's nice.
there you go. Here we go. Toss up 2. This man temporarily kept a Cézanne still life in a hedge while returning from a project to buy paintings for the National Gallery in Paris. With Hubert Henderson, this liberal peer wrote the pamphlet, Can Lloyd George Do It? This man resigned from the Indian Fiscal Commission after marrying the ballerina Lydia Lopakova. This advisor's views were spurned in favor of the Heavenly Twins.
Americans?
Yes.
Nice.
Your bonus. Johannes Daubert was so thoroughly impressed by this man's first major book that he rode his bike 100 kilometers to talk to him, then quit philosophy since he had nothing to add. For 10 points each, name this mathematician turned philosopher who rejected the psychologistic account of mathematics in his logical investigations.
That's what mine gets right.
Sounds like Frege.
It's Edmund Husserl. Husserl developed phenomenology around this methodological technique, which involves suspending judgment about the contents of the external world and reserving metaphysical assumptions in order to observe consciousness directly.
Willing suspension physically.
Sure. I mean, they kind of said that, but.
Answer?
Analytic.
Bracketing, or epoche. Husserl's first book was a treatise on the philosophy of the subject, which includes the elementary mathematics of numbers and basic operations of addition and subtraction. Frege earlier published a book on the foundations of the subject, which influenced Russell.
Arithmetic.
Yeah. For 10. Toss-up 3. One of this author's poems is set in a song whose piano accompaniment opens by rapidly repeating F-A-F-E-D-E. Anacreon's Grave is one of the texts by this author that are set in a cycle of 51 songs by Hugo Wolf, which opens with 3 settings of this author's The Harp Player. He wrote the lyrics used in part 2 of Mahler's Symphony of 1000, where his text for the Holy Anchorites are sung by the chorus. A setting of one of this author's poems begins with G octaves in the piano's right hand and is about a son who is tempted to die while his father rushes away from the Erlking. Schubert used a... Yes. Common examples of these things include I/O, maybe, and list, for 10 points each, namely these structures that are used to effectively create general types and to chain operations together in a certain programming paradigm. They have been analogized to stations on an assembly line.
Like quantifiers?
Quantifier.
Monads. Monads are used in this programming paradigm, a declarative category that is opposed to imperative paradigms like object-oriented and procedural programming. The most common example of a language purely in this paradigm is Haskell.
Yeah, it's functional.
One of the properties of the functional paradigm is that it avoids these consequences, where a global state or other system external to the program is modified in the course of execution. Their name evokes certain consequences in medicine.
Side effects.
Yes.
Nice.
Person on 10.
A Baptist pastor named Peter Ruckman was known for his vitriolic arguments that a particular example of this action was divinely inspired. Origen created a document called the Hexapla, which compared different instances of this action. A group of Armenian saints, including David the Invincible and Moses Korenatzi, is named for their holy performance of this action. One of them, Mesrop Mashtots, invented the Armenian alphabet.
Translating the Bible.
Yes.
Nice.
In a poem by this writer, two characters' footprints are described as first traces in the world of life and time, and love and immortal hope and vanishing. For example, each famous Victorian poet who explored Norse mythology in Ask to Embla and Ragnarok. This poet was the subject of Mortimer Cropper's biography, The Great Ventriloquist, and two critics controversially claimed another poet, the very Melusine, was influenced by him.
Tennyson?
Randolph Henry Ashe. Roland Mitchell and Maud Bailey worked together to race Cropper and James Blackadder to discover evidence of Ashe's passionate affair with the fellow poet Christabel Lamont in this novel by A.S. Byatt.
Dangerous
Answer.
liaisons.
Possession. Ashe's love of the dramatic monologue is often compared to this real Victorian poet, whose Mr. Sludge the Medium provides the epigraph to Possession. This man wrote My Last Duchess.
Browning.
Yeah. 10 points. 5. These conditions often arise from adhesion of nanosensitive type 1 fimbriated UPEC strains to UP1 proteins or umbrella cells. These conditions may be cleared through trapping by TAM horsefall protein. A type of these conditions is the primary indication for nitrofurantoin, also known as macrobid. These conditions typically involve formation of a biofilm on transitional epithelia. Chronic recurrence of them predisposes patients to an ascending route of infection that can lead to a form of these conditions called pyelonephritis, which affects the upper part of a namesake.
Bladder infections?
Yes. If two continuous functions agree on a set with this property, they must agree everywhere. For example, let's each name this property. A subset of a topological space has this property if its closure is the whole space, or equivalently, if it intersects every open set in the topology.
Open.
Dense. The fact that the real numbers have the Archimedean property can be used to prove that this subset, often symbolized Q, is dense in the reals. This is the set of numbers that can be written as a quotient of two integers.
Set of numbers that are quotient. Are the rationals?
This adjective refers to a space like the real numbers that has a countable, dense subset.
Adjective. Real.
Separable. 10.
What's going on?
I don't know.
Toss up 6. In a novel with this language in its title, Bear Bavinsky burns most of his paintings. A teacher of this language titles that 2018 novel by Tom Rackman. The author says good luck in a cracked attempt at this language in a Richard Hugo poetry collection that reflects on the author's military experiences. Jhumpa Lahiri originally wrote The Boundary in this language, and a poetic form that originated in this non-English language was used by another author to write the lines.
Like Arabic?
Nope. One luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right, and I have been one acquainted with the night. Locals speaking this language populate the predominant settings of Roderick Hudson, A Farewell to Arms, and Catch-22. For 10 points, name this native language spoken by the title character of Mario Puzo's The Godfather.
Italian.
Yeah. This priest wrote a virelai about courtly love called Douce Dame Jolie. For 10 points each, name this canon who wrote music for Reims Cathedral, and who was the first composer to supervise the creation of an anthology of his complete works.
I should know. Louis.
Guillaume de Machaut. Guillaume de Machaut wrote the first complete setting by a single composer of this collection of texts. That work uses a chant intonation to open the Gloria and Credo movements.
Psalms.
Mass. Machaut's Messe de Notre Dame, as well as the Roman de Fauvel, exemplify this style of medieval polyphony. It was written about by Philippe de Vitry and is contrasted with a preceding Antiqua style.
Gregorian chant.
Ars Nova. 0.
Okay.
The 2018 Palme d'Or winner Shoplifters is a film from this country. In another film from this country, a young woman softly hums Kidi 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 while straddling a would-be suitor and inserting needles into his eyes. Audition is a...
France.
No. Is a horror film from this country, which also produced the animated film in which a nerdy boy gets his foot snagged on an airship's mooring line and almost plunges to his death, but is saved by a young witch in a purple dress who miraculously regains her powers. In another film from this country, 4 people, including a woodcutter and a bandit, all remember a murder very differently. Rashomon is from, for 10 points, what country where Kiki's delivery service was made by Hayao Miyazaki?
Japan.
Yeah.
I had that in the
This project was begun during the reign of Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, for 10 points each, named this public work that discharged waste into the Tiber River. This marvel of Roman engineering was originally built to drain the marsh on the site of the Forum.
Is it not the
Yeah, that
Roman
makes
sewer.
sense.
Say it again?
The Roman sewer.
No. The Cloaca Maxima, or the greatest sewer.
Yeah.
This architect later cleansed and enlarged the Cloaca Maxima before riding through the sewer in a boat to prove his success. This right-hand man to Augustus also built the original Pantheon and won the Battle of Actium.
Is it, wait, Agrippa?
This contemporary of Agrippa made reference to Agrippa's public works program in his 10th volume De Architectura, which inspired Leonardo da Vinci.
I don't think so, but.
No, Vitruvius.
Oh,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
trivia.
Yeah.
Who is he, the right-hand man of?
Agrippa.
Augustus.
How's his name?
Concept 8. For a smooth function f between manifolds, a point P is described by this term if the differential of f at P is full rank. An axiom in Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory guaranteeing that no set is an element of itself is alternately named the axiom of foundation or the axiom of this term. Any sufficiently large string in a language with this property can be written as XYZ, such that sticking more Y's in the middle keeps the new string in the language, according to the pumping lemma. This term describes a graph whose vertices all have the same degree, and every face of a Platonic solid is a...
Regular.
Yeah.
Oh,
This goddess is alternatively listed as the daughter of Peneus or of the Arcadian river Ladon. For 10 points each, named this Naiad who was turned into a laurel tree to avoid a pursuer.
No, like
No, she was.
Answer.
Daphne.
It's Daphne. Daphne was pursued by this god.
Apollo.
Apollo's pursuit of Daphne came after he was shot by an arrow fired by this goddess, either because he mocked her archery skills or because she hated his singing.
Fire. She fires. Guess.
Artemis?
Eros.
Oh.
That's
A character in one of this author's short stories only realizes that he is convalescing in his old school when he sees a chalkboard on which he had written the words, "Stranger, bear word to the Spartans, we." The protagonist of one of this author's novels refuses to sign a deposition containing the word amorous. That character is approached by the journalist Todjus. A birthday cake in the shape of St. Anthony Abbey is brought in at the end of another novel by this author, in which Robert, one of a group who had chosen to take the host of the Lamb, spends an hour and a half every morning at the Prince Heinrich Hotel playing...
Bull.
Yes.
Oh.
Joseph Asagai calls this character's choice to straighten her hair mutilation and later asks her to move to Nigeria with him. For 10 points each, name this character the sister of Walter, who has to choose between Joseph and her rich, assimilated boyfriend, George Murchison.
It's either Becky Sharp or I think it's Becky Sharp. No, sister. Amelia. Amelia.
Beneatha was created by this author who wrote a play about the life of the younger family as they figure out how to use an insurance payout and decide whether to take a buyout rather than move into an all-white neighborhood.
Yeah, it's whatever it is. Yeah, that's right.
Name that play whose title comes from a Langston Hughes poem, Harlem, which asks what happens to a dream deferred.
Amazing.
Yes.
Okay, I was on the right ballpark.
Yeah. Oh boy.
This man's coffin was stolen 22 years after his death from his resting place on the Ile Dieu. The national fleet was destroyed at Mers el-Kabir in anticipation of this man's government coming to power. He was succeeded by Robert...
So like Patan?
Yes.
Nice.
This statesman's second reply to Hayne praised liberty and union, now and forever, one and inseparable, for 10 points each. Famous politician from New Hampshire who signed a treaty with Baron Ashburn. He was the third member of the so-called Great Triumvirate alongside Clay and Calhoun and was Secretary of State under 3 presidents.
Webster.
The Webster-Ashburn Treaty resolved this mostly non-violent boundary dispute over the northern border of Maine with New Brunswick. It began with disagreements between lumberjacks.
The Stock War?
The Webster-Ashburn Treaty also put to rest the disputes surrounding this short-lived microstate at the far north of New Hampshire. This country declared independence and drafted a constitution after denizens were taxed by both America and Canada, resigning their efforts when the American militia showed up.
There's no proof that
I don't know.
Green Mountain Republic.
Yeah, actually,
Answer.
Green Mountain Republic.
Republic of Indian Stream, 20. 160 to 30 is the score at the half.
I had 25 because he had a negative
That's right.
7.
That's right. 25.
I don't know what this fact is. It's not good. I'm scared.
All good? Okay.
Yeah.
A playwright from this country was given the epithet enemy of woman for his misogynistic tendencies and wrote To Deal a Bullet in the Heart and The People of the Cave. The first modern Arabic novel, Zainab, was written by Muhammad Hussein Haikal, an author from this country, which was also home to Tawfiq al-Hakim. An author from this country wrote a novel in which Yasin has a realization when he sees his father playing the...
Egypt?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is that? It's just...
This man modified Patrick Geddes' theories to divide the history of civilization into the Eotechnic, Paleotechnic, and Neotechnic periods. Van Pointiche named the sociologist who wrote The Myth of the Machine and The City in History.
Yay, sociology. Frankfurter.
Louis Mumford. Mumford wrote in Techniques and Civilization that this machine, not the steam engine, is the key machine of the modern industrial age. In the 13th century, water-based versions of these machines began to appear at monasteries.
No, but frames? Weaving frames?
Clocks.
Oh.
Water clocks. Mumford used this proper name to refer to people who work in mega machines. Ward Churchill claimed that people killed in the 9/11 attacks were little versions of this person.
No, I'm not gonna.
Eichmann's.
I was gonna say that, but I thought it would be offensive.
Oh. 0 on the bonus.
That was such a weird bonus.
A 1987 book asks why gender metaphors in this book should not be considered as a fundamental component of the work's discussions. A condensed, summarizing commentary was added to this book by Émilie du Châtelet in her standard French translation.
The Principia Mathematica.
Yes.
Nice.
A man with scales and peacock feathers sits on a house in this painting. Van Pointiche named this predominantly green painting whose angry central character plays the piano. The title of this painting is on the piano's music book.
What?
Wait, what?
It's the Ruskin one,
Ruskin had a painting?
like Whistler.
Oh, it's like
Like
freaking
really-
Answer.
nocturne.
The Gold Scab. The Gold Scab is by this artist who depicted his mother sitting in a chair in arrangement in gray and black, number 1.
So Whistler.
Yeah.
It was.
Whistler?
Whistler usually signed his paintings with a monograph based on this creature, usually with an elongated stinger-like tail. Yes. 20.
Wait, good, like, knowledge on the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
one.
yeah, actually.
Maryland Red got some 30s. Anyway. The U.S. military uses a wrist-mounted version of this device called a PCAS. Edward Jones and Harold Segal's Wilkes pipeline technique involves using a fake example of this device during studies. An early version of this device was invented by John Larson for use in Berkeley by August Vollner and was later adopted.
Polygraph?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
This man was compelled by his father into a loveless marriage with Cardinal Richelieu's niece, whom he locked away at Châteauroux, a famous French general who shattered the tercio formations of the army of Flanders at the Battle of Rocroi. During the Franco-Spanish War, he was decisively defeated by his rival Turenne at the Battle of the Dunes.
Is it? Prince Con? Okay, yes, it's Prince of Conde. It's not.
Answer. Prompt.
Okay, great.
The Grand Con.
Yes.
Good.
The Grand Condé was a rebellious leader in this civil war during the minority of Louis XIV. This rebellion consisted of a parlement phase and a prince's phase, and was named for slings used to break the windows of Cardinal Mazarin's associates.
It's the Fronde.
The Grand Condé was pardoned for his role in the Fronde by this 1659 treaty that ended the Franco-Spanish War. By the terms of this treaty, Louis XIV was married to Maria Theresa of Spain, and France gained the county of Roussillon.
Okay, I mean.
It's not just the Pyrenees.
Yeah, just I don't know.
Pyrenees.
30.
Good one.
Nice.
Catch.
Thank you.
House up 14. One form of this quantity is proportional to the ratio of k squared divided by epsilon in the k epsilon model. The Hartmann number is the ratio of electromagnetic force to a force caused by the presence of this quantity. This value is proportional to velocity to the power of the behavior index minus 1 according to the Ostwald-de Waele equation. That equation can be used to model rheopectic materials which experience an increase in this quantity over time. This quantity is directly proportional to the square of the mixing length at a boundary layer. Stokes' law states that the product of 6 pi radius flow velocity and this value equals the drag force. For 10 points, name this quantity measured in poise that represents a fluid's resistance to flow.
Viscosity?
Yeah.
Wait, what is it measured?
Wait, I was
P-O-I-D-S?
oscillating between viscosity.
P-O-I-Z-E, or S-E, sorry.
Weird.
Answer the following about flamenco dancing steps for everyone teach. The traditional means of advancing to show one's legs and arms when flamenco dancing is the escobilla step, in which this specific part of the body brushes along the ground. This padded area of the foot is found between the toes and the arch.
Oh no. The balls?
Yes. One of the most distinctive steps in flamenco dancing is this sort of step known as a golpe. In tap dancing, this type of step is contrasted with a stomp as the weight is shifted onto the foot, which makes the sound.
What are these bonuses? Like hitting it with your heel?
It's called a stamp. In the 20th century, flamenco steps have been combined with steps from other dance traditions as part of Nuevo Flamenco. One such style of flamenco has been influenced by this Cuban dance genre, whose yambu form is performed with a 4/4 clave rhythm.
Salsa.
Rumba.
Okay, that makes sense. I would have labeled that.
Alright, 10 on that. Also 15. This person's trademarks included using the inscription FC, which stood for the non-existent Freedom Club, and using Eugene O'Neill stamps, which was probably intentional misdirection. In 1967, he became the youngest assistant math professor in Berkeley history, and decades later...
Ted Kaczynski.
Yes.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah, that is a thing.
The positive counterpart to this concept is 自然, which can be loosely translated as self-so or so of its own. For example, teach made a central Taoist concept which refers to being in harmony with the Tao such that one's actions are uncontrived and spontaneous. It has been translated as effortless action and non-doing. A text from a different school of thought evokes a sentiment similar to Wu Wei when it asked, was it not Shun who did nothing and yet ruled well? That text, the Analects, was written by this man, whose school of thought was revived during the Tang Dynasty in response to Taoism and Buddhism.
Confucius.
A traditional painting subject shows the Buddha, Lao Tzu, and Confucius tasting this substance, with 3 different reactions emphasizing the simultaneous harmony and differences among their respective religious traditions.
Vinegar.
Yes.
What toss are we going to do?
15.
You deal with Alex, don't eat too much sugar.
Toss it up 16. You can get it later. A painting by this artist depicts a man pointing at a book on a woman's lap and mid-page turn as a gentleman serenades them with his Spanish guitar. A version of the painting by this artist of the love lesson in the Louvre depicts a hazy landscape with a mountain and a river in place of a boat. In another version of that painting, a small dog stands next to a man in red, facing away from the viewer and holding a staff. A painting by this artist depicts well-dressed couples about to depart an island, surrounded by swarms of tutus. That painting by this artist is a typical example of his fête galante theme. Grandpoint's famous French Rococo painter of Gersaint's shop sign and the embarkation to Cythera.
Watteau?
Yeah.
There we go.
And your bonus. One hallmark for this disease is the dimpled appearance of skin, which is termed peau d'orange. For 10 points each, name this type of cancer. Overexpression of HER2 is associated with an increased risk in this disease.
What are these bonuses? Melanoma?
Breast cancer. The role of this screening exam for breast cancer has developed controversy as to its utility. It's essentially an X-ray of the breast.
Is it the PAP test?
No, mammogram.
Oh,
This term is used for breast cancer that lacks estrogen receptors, progesterone receptors, or HER2. This type of breast cancer is notable due to the inability to treat it with hormone therapies.
This is thing. Non-hormonal treatable breast cancer.
triple negative breast cancer. So, triple negative on that bonus. Toss up 17. Thomas Addis Emmet concluded his argument in this case by quoting the Aeneid, which prompted William Wirt to compare the U.S. to Troy. Sears, Roebuck & Co. v. Stifel Co. finally settled an argument introduced in this case that federal patents preempted state intellectual property law. That federal patents preempted state intellectual property law. This case nullified.
Gibbons v. Ogden.
Yes.
That's what I was gonna say.
Bonus. This writer's novel Clélie introduced the carte de tendre, a map depicting the path towards love. Prefontaine named this French writer who coined the term roman à clé and fictionalized the lives of 17th century socialites in novels such as Artemen, which is among the longest novels ever written.
Is it the long?
No.
Answer?
Richardson.
Madeleine de Scudéry. De Scudéry was among the witty précieuses mocked in this playwright's The Ridiculous Précieuse. Orgon falls under the spell of a hypocrite in his play Tartuffe. De Scudéry solves the mystery surrounding the death of the renowned goldsmith René Cardillac in a novella by this Prussian writer whose tales include The Sandman.
Hoffman. It's Hoffman, yeah.
Yes, 20? A Korean folktale features a woman lighting a fire on the tip of this object in order to cure her husband of leprosy. A Japanese yokai called Tenome has eyes on these objects. The monkey-like Kami Sarut.
Like hands.
Yes.
Nice. Shake your. That doesn't have fast.
You know
Wait,
what
what
that
happens?
thing is, right?
Wait, that's like the Pan's Labyrinth thing?
Yeah.
Alright, bonus.
Wait, I didn't know it was Joshua Vision.
Donald Rumsfeld said that he eliminated these two words from a speech, but forgot to have them removed from a banner. 20 points each. Give these two words displayed above a man giving a May 2003 speech on the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, which resulted in much mockery.
Mission accomplished.
This president, who was speaking about the Iraq War, gave the so-called mission accomplished speech. Rumsfeld told this journalist he forgot to remove the banner. This co-author of the book The Final Days wrote the 4-volume Bush at War series, which included Plan of Attack and State of Denial.
Sure. Greenwald.
Bob Woodward.
Oh, I feel like I've heard. Well, no, I haven't actually covered.
I think it's the water guy.
That's Ed.
No, that's
Oh.
Carl Burson went to Blair. That other water guy. I think I went to Blair.
I think I'm over 10 before they come. Just like so that's like so that's your slow one. Yeah, we did. Really?
Oh,
Yeah.
so-
Look it up. No way. Look it up.
No. Wait,
Sorry,
I looked at Blair.
did something wrong with
Wait,
this
he's not
version.
on the alumni list. But maybe it's
What's
the
up, Blair?
dropout. Oh, I think. Dude, I was
Um,
Sylvester Stallone. I loved it.
You want to score check this?
yeah, sure. I have 280 to 65 right now.
No, it's 320.
I must have not written down
Where
something.
where were you at 12?
At 12, I had 190 to 35,
Okay, keep going.
185 to 55.
Wait,
That's probably where I messed up.
no, I mean, so it was 190, then on 13, they got 10, 3 on the bonus, so we're 230.
You already have powers.
And you sent them a candy for it.
You already have
Yeah, I'm trying to find why I don't have anything there. So there was House of 12, which was on Principia, which they 20'd, and then there was Polygraph, which I didn't write correctly.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you missed
I
40.
need to look at
Yeah.
like art history.
So it's 230.
Yeah, then the negative.
Then there's a neg, so 225.
Yep.
There's another neg, so 220.
No, that was
And
not.
the next one's another
That's
4
good.
10, or 3 on the bonus.
We have
on
math.
15.
Oh, yeah.
40 points at 15.
I
Yeah.
was on Polygraph and I was told.
10, 3 on the
That's
bonus,
such a
another
weird-
candy.
Yep.
I didn't know that was based on.
That's 265, then another neg, 260.
So it should be
You
let's
should watch.
see,
You should watch it.
320.
320, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I just didn't write down one of the lines. That's
What's else we're going into?
19. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay.
We'll get resumed with 19. A law widely seen as retribution for this law's passage claimed to respond to the death of Chase Harrison in a hot car in Herndon, Virginia. This law was strongly advocated by Bill Browder, the CEO of Hermitage Capital Management. In December 2016, a global version of this law was signed, adding to its targets people such as Yahya Jammeh. Reconsideration of this law and its fallout was the purported reason for a June 2016 meeting involving Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, and Donald Trump Jr. As a result of this bill, the Dima Yakovlev law.
The Magnitsky Act?
Yep.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's the
These two cell types are extremely deficient in mouse strains with loss of function mutations in DNA PKCS. 10 points each. Name this pair of immune cell types that are functionally eliminated in PRKDC SCID mice due to defects in VDJ recombination, which is integral to their development in the thymus and bone marrow.
T cells?
I want B and T cells.
They wanted both?
Yeah, I said name this pair of cell. The NOD background in NOD SCID gamma mice is used on its own as a spontaneous model for this disease, which can be prevented by injecting the mice with Freund's adjuvant. The biobreeding rat is another model of this disease.
Bubonic plague?
Type 1 diabetes. The gamma in NOD SCID gamma refers to the common IL-2R gamma chain of the receptors for a group of these molecules called interleukins. X-linked SCID results from mutations in that receptor for this broad class of cell signaling proteins, and the lethality of Spanish flu was likely from a namesake storm of them.
Inflammatory agents?
Cytokines, so 0. Alright, last toss-up. After looking at this object, a character thinks, no, the other was also this thing, for nothing was simply one thing. A person who lives near this object has a son afflicted with tuberculous hip, and other characters decide to bring him parcels after ruminating over what does one send to this place. A character has had her vision when she finishes a painting with a single bold stroke upon seeing this object. A trip to this place almost gets cancelled when the children aren't ready in the morning, and earlier various characters repeatedly declare that they can't travel to this location tomorrow. Time. Because the wind wasn't right, among other reasons. For 10 points, identify this building that only Cam, James, Lily Briscoe, and Mr. Ramsey end up journeying to in a Virginia Woolf novel.
A lighthouse?
Yes.
No, actually, not that now. I heard.
All but one member of this institution drowned themselves in the name of the title character at the end of Max Beerbohm's satirical novel Zuleika Dobson. For 10 points each, name this institution from which Paul Pennyfeather is forced to rusticate at the beginning of a later novel after falling victim to the Bollinger Club's drunken revelry.
Yale?
Oxford. Though it is thinly disguised as Christminster, a more serious representation of Oxford in literature appears in the novel Jude the Obscure by this author of The Mayor of Casterbridge and Far From the Maddie Crowd.
Hardy.
Getting into Oxford is the focus of the play The History Boys by this British author, who also wrote a series of Talking Heads monologues.
Johnson.
Alan Bennett, 10 points. Okay, so the final score is 315 for Maryland Black and 95 for Nevada. The game, guys.
You stay, guys. We'll shake hands and then stay.
Oh, you're done.
Oh, he was really good at math. He was also like very smart, although his good person.
What's that thing called?
The manifesto. It's called like industrialization in American modern society.